Chapter 3 of The Search for Being, D.W. Winnicott's perspective, Going on Being. We grow in our own way if our environment is good enough. David Winnicott said our central self was an inherited potential which we would grow and develop with good enough parental experiences. We start out, said Winnicott, as unintegrated beings without a feeling of wholeness in space or time. At first, he explained, we are merely a succession of impulses. Our dependence on our environment is so complete in the beginning of our lives, said Winnicott, that it isn't useful to think of ourselves as a unit, but rather as an environment individual setup. There is no self, Winnicott said, at the beginning, to distinguish me from not me. Psychiatrists use the term primary narcissism to describe the environment individual setup when the individual doesn't perceive the environment, when the self has not yet developed. Winnicott said that if our environment is good enough in the beginning of our lives, we have no awareness of it. He spoke of an essential aloneness in our earliest days of infancy that could only take place under maximum conditions of dependence. It was a paradox, he said, and we would never again have the experience of this exact same sense of aloneness. Yet throughout life, Winnicott said, our sense of aloneness would be there, even though we were unaware of it, the conditions which are essential to it. We might return to it if we needed to start over again, perhaps in therapy or analysis, where we might get in touch with it in a holding environment provided by the therapist. Before this sense of aloneness, Winnicott said, there was a state of unaliveness. In later life, a wish to be dead, he said, is the wish to be unalive. We emerge from this state of aloneness to a state of absolute dependence, said Winnicott. Winnicott called this original dependence double dependence because it is not yet sensed. At this point, the infant, he tells us, exists rather than reacts. The living infant and all his processes are a going on being. It is adaptation to the needs of the infant by caretakers that allows the infant to be, said Winnicott, that allows her innate human tendency toward growth and integration to take place. To Winnicott, integration was closely tied to self-expression. What the infant needs in the very beginning, said Winnicott, is reliability and continuity in his experience with others. The mother or parent who could identify with her infant could provide the protective environment the infant needed for the self to develop, said Winnicott. The care of her nonverbal infant, Winnicott contended, would be based on empathy. It's that good enough parental care, said Winnicott, that allows us to have a personal existence, that allows ego strength or continuity of being to take root. Feeling loved in the beginning of our lives, Winnicott said, is the result of receiving physical care. Even before our birth, Winnicott believed, there are body memories. Winnicott maintained the self is composed of memories and feelings and instincts. Our early environment, he said, must meet our physiological needs with a reliable parental response. Without it, said Winnicott, we would fall to pieces. So in the beginning, physical care equates with the psychological care that holds us together. Environmental failure, Winnicott concluded, caused personal disintegration. Any impingement or failure of adaptation, said Winnicott, in the maturational processes in the facilitating environment, causes a reaction in the infant, and the reaction breaks up going on being. It's impingement, Winnicott felt, that interrupts being. He went on, the alternative to being is reacting, and reacting interrupts being and annihilates. Thus, the opposite of being, Winnicott felt, was annihilation. Everyone experienced, said Winnicott, distortions to their growth as a result of some degree of environmental failure. But it was, he said, when reactive interruptions of being last too long that chaos enters our lives. Winnicott explained that hypochondriacal anxiety, as well as depression and the obsessional behavior that sometimes accompanied depression, were examples of chaos in the inner world. Chaos, Winnicott said, was not the state of unintegration we experience at the beginning of our lives, not the state of aloneness that is there too at the beginning. Rather, chaos is disintegration. It enters our very constitutions, Winnicott believed, when the disturbance is beyond a degree that is tolerable according to earlier experiences of continuous being. Chaos is the opposite of order, said Winnicott. Winnicott describes chaos as a broken line of being and tells us we only recover when we again experience the state of continuity of being. When the parental adaptation to the infant's needs is not good enough, Winnicott said, the infant gets seduced into compliance to environmental demands. A false self is created through introjection, said Winnicott, and the child may become just like the person who dominates his environment. In this way, said Winnicott, the maturational processes could be short-circuited by identifications which result in a copy, perhaps, of another person. Winnicott defined immorality as complying at the expense of a personal way of life. Compliance and imitation, he said, are the hallmarks of the false self. Spontaneity, according to Winnicott, was the lifeblood of the true self. The false self, Winnicott explained, hides the true self, which does not comply with environmental demands, which becomes uncommunicable. Thus, acting from a false self, Winnicott said, feel a sense of futility and feel Those acting from a false self, Winnicott said, feel a sense of futility and feel unreal. They're often restless, he said, and unable to concentrate. They have, Winnicott said, a need to collect impingements from the external environment so that the living time of the individual can be filled by reactions to these impingements. What they lacked in their life was a parent's devotion, which helps the child's true self to express itself. What is absent in their lives, Winnicott believed, is creativity, which only the true self has, and a feeling of realness. The true self, he thought, is the source of the spontaneous gesture and the personal idea. What needed to happen in the beginning of life, Winnicott explains, was for the infant's body functions to form the basis for building up a body ego. We need to live in maturity, said Winnicott, in relation with ourselves, with our bodies, with our external world, and to meet our needs without being antisocial. First, we are soma, said Winnicott. Then our psyche or self arises to bind together past experiences as the seat of present moment awareness of our potentialities and our expectations for the future. For our potentialities and for Winnicott, the mental and physical were not different phenomena. Our human nature he saw as the interrelatedness between psyche and soma. Our psyche, Winnicott stressed, in health, was anchored in soma. Finally, mind or intellect becomes part of our state of being, said Winnicott. It is our intellect, Winnicott believed, that helps us to explain and expect maladaptation, and in so doing allows us to change maladaptation back to adaptation. Where maladaptation in the beginning of our lives wasn't too overpoweringly great, said Winnicott, there often comes about an intellectual overgrowth, a mind that might later serve us well, even though unstable to a degree, because it is reactive rather than inherent. In this way, Winnicott explains, our mind might become the nursemaid that acts as mother substitute and cares for the baby and the child's self. Such a mind, explains Winnicott, dominates the psyche soma rather than being a function of it. Life for those with such an overgrowth of the intellect, Winnicott said, can seem a little unreal. The primitive tasks of our infancy, said Winnicott, are never fully completed. We all at any age, he said, have more primitive as well as more mature environmental requirements. Therapy or analysis, he believed, could often bring our primitive needs to the surface. We all need different emotional environments at different times, Winnicott thought. For health to exist, Winnicott said, the society as well as the individual must be healthy. He saw the healthy individual person and the healthy environment as interdependent. The full maturity of the individual, he said, could not be reached if the social setting was ill. He saw most adults as growing and developing and changing until the day they died. Once we reached a certain level of maturity, Winnicott said, we shared responsibility for the environment.